The last thing I remembered was the thud, the echo of metal and my body hitting the elevator floor. Not a scream, not a gasp, just a silence so thick it pressed against my eardrums like underwater pressure. My mind was cloudy, flickering between the sharp fluorescent light above me and the pain throbbing at the base of my skull. Then voices, muffled, distant, fading again. I came to in a hospital bed. The walls were white, sterile, and unfamiliar. I blinked, slow and unsure, trying to piece together what day it was. 2 weeks. 2 weeks until my wedding. That thought pierced through the haze faster than any painkiller could dull. I jerked slightly, feeling the stiffness in my shoulder and the brace hugging my ribs. Panic rose in my chest. The doctor entered, clipboard in hand, face practiced and calm. Mild concussion, bruised ribs, nothing surgical, but you need monitoring. Rest. Limited stimulation. Before I could ask if I could still attend my final dress fitting, they were there. My parents, my mother, Rutha, already pulling up a chair, brushing imaginary dust off the hem of my hospital blanket. My father, arms crossed, voice soft but firm. "We're taking you home. No arguments." I blinked again. Home? To your old room. It's set up. You'll be safe there. Comfortable. Safe. I should have noticed the word then. Safe wasn't the same as free. The drive home was quiet, except for the rhythmic tapping of my mother's nails on her phone screen. No mention of Thatchlin, no update on the florist or the rehearsal dinner. Just silence and the smell of old leather from the back seat of Dad's Buick. When we pulled into the driveway, I saw that familiar house, white columns, trimmed hedges, windows too clean to be welcoming. My childhood bedroom had been rearranged. The bed had new linens, the desk cleared, my old trophies dusted and aligned. Everything was pristine, too pristine. They settled me in like a fragile doll, pillows fluffed, water placed just within reach. My phone? "You need to disconnect," Rutha said, sliding it into her purse. "Focus on recovery." That night, the door clicked. I didn't check, but I knew. Locked. "Just for safety," my dad had said earlier. "We don't want you wandering if the concussion makes you disoriented." Every time I asked about the wedding, about Thatchlin, I got the same answer. "Everything's handled. You just rest." But something sat wrong in my gut, the way it always did when I was being managed rather than loved. 3 days in, I reached for my laptop. Gone. I asked to check my email. Mom smiled and handed me a puzzle book instead. I asked about the wedding planner. She told me, "Iverlin's got it all under control." I tried to log into our wedding portal from the old desktop in the hallway. Password denied. I tried the vendor spreadsheet from my Google Drive. Access revoked. Thatchlin hadn't called. No text. Nothing. I asked to go outside, just for a walk around the block. "You're not stable on your feet yet," Rutha said. "We can't take any risks." Something cracked in me then. Not loud, not violent. Just a shift, like a foundation giving way under decades of subtle erosion. When I was 12, I broke my leg at school. My parents canceled the college tour we'd planned for weeks. "You're not in shape for that kind of stress," they said. When I was 24, Mazzara borrowed my blazer for an interview, spilled coffee on it, then blamed the dry cleaner. Mom said, "Don't make her feel bad. It's just a blazer." Now, at 33, I was watching the same patterns repeat. My silence became their script. My injury became their excuse. That night, I pretended to sleep. I waited until the hallway light clicked off and the creaking of my father's footsteps faded. I sat up slowly, pressing one hand to my side. I tiptoed to the door. The knob didn't move. I crouched by the dresser. My phone was still missing. I opened the top drawer. Empty. I tore a page from the puzzle book and scribbled a note with the eyeliner from my makeup bag. "Please tell Thatchlin to call me." I slid it under the door. The next morning, Rutha came in with tea and a book of wedding poetry. She didn't mention the note. I stood at the window, holding the warm mug in both hands. Below, in the backyard, Mazzara was twirling with my dog. She wore my robe, the satin one I'd packed for the honeymoon. She threw her head back in a laugh I recognized all too well. The laugh she used when she knew she'd won. They said I was healing, but it looked more like she was rehearsing. I sat down on the edge of the bed, staring at the locked door. My breath was steady, my chest no longer tight with panic, but with planning. "This isn't recovery," I whispered. "This is removal." I reached beneath the mattress, fingers brushing against the cool metal of the dessert fork I'd hidden the night before. If I was going to get out, I'd need more than rest. I'd need resolve. I woke before the lock clicked open. The door didn't creak this time, which told me they'd started oiling the hinges. Even their silence was strategic. I kept my breathing slow, pretending to still be asleep as footsteps approached. A soft knock, then the familiar cadence of my mother's voice. "Sweetheart, breakfast is ready. Let's sit together today." I waited until I heard her retreat. Then I sat up. The same four walls. The same bookshelf with books I didn't ask to read. The same window that overlooked the backyard, my only link to the outside world. But today felt different. I was different. My mind wasn't foggy anymore. After breakfast, I asked, again, if I could check my email. Just for a moment. Mom smiled that rehearsed smile. "Why don't you let your brain rest a little longer? You've been through a lot." She never said no, just kept shifting the frame. That night, after I feigned sleep for the second time, I reached for the old tablet I'd hidden behind the drawer panel. My fingers moved fast, heart racing. I connected to the guest Wi-Fi. Nothing loaded. Not my browser, not the backup cloud, not even the wedding website. I wasn't just being encouraged to unplug. I was being digitally dismantled, piece by piece. The next morning, I dug into the browser's old cache, sifting through pages I'd opened weeks ago. My wedding calendar showed nothing. No deadlines, no meetings, like the event had never existed. When I checked my drive, the wedding budget file returned an error. Access denied. I stared, motionless. I tried the group chat I'd shared with the planner and my bridesmaids. It no longer existed. The group had been deleted. The archive, scrubbed. The pit in my stomach told me what my heart already feared. They didn't pause the wedding. They continued it. Without me. A text surfaced in my mind, one I'd dismissed a few days ago. From Claire, my college roommate and one of my bridesmaids. "Hope you're okay. Heard you were stepping back." That took guts. Stepping back. No, I hadn't. I was shoved. That afternoon, I heard laughter rolling through the house, not the kind that lifts a room, but the kind that sharpens edges. I crept to the railing and looked down. Mazara, my sister, walked in wearing 5-inch designer heels she didn't own last week. She was glowing, hair curled, skin professionally tanned. She carried a white garment bag, and Mom was beside her saying, "That smile will look perfect on the day." The day? What day? Mazara turned, laughing, and my father appeared in the doorway with a glass of wine. He said with no irony, "We'll keep it simple, just a symbolic switch." The air left my lungs. They weren't planning around me. They were planning over me. That night, I wrote a note and tucked it into an envelope. Slipped it to Mrs. Brown, the housekeeper who'd been with us since I was 7. "Please," I whispered, "get this to Thatchlin. It's important." Her hands trembled when she took it. By dinner, Dad casually mentioned, "Thatchlin's gone upstate for a few days. He needed to decompress. He'll reach out when he's ready." Decompress? He was fine 2 weeks ago. We were picking cake flavors and debating centerpieces. The man I loved wasn't avoiding me. Someone was interfering. I sat on my bed that evening, staring at the ceiling. I remembered the cake tasting, how he'd looked at me and said, "You make a better bride than planner. Your mind's 10 steps ahead of mine." Now I wondered if that memory was true, or just well performed. What if they'd told him I wanted out? What if they forged my silence? The next morning, Mom entered my room with that same calm, warm tone. She sat on the edge of my bed, hands clasped neatly in her lap. "Mazara's helping with the details so nothing gets wasted," she said. "It's generous of you to step aside. We know this isn't what you pictured." I looked her straight in the eye. "Are you replacing me?" She tilted her head, soft smile unwavering. "No, honey. You're choosing peace. You're not up for it. And that's okay. Not up for it. I wasn't sick. I was silenced. I nodded once and turned away, swallowing everything I wanted to scream. My hands gripped the blanket like it might anchor me to the life that kept slipping. Later that day, my old iCloud account synced on the tablet for just a second, long enough for a stray message to come through. From Sarah, one of the original bridesmaids. They just posted a new save the date with Mazara's name. I froze. My chest didn't tighten. It caved. I tapped the link with shaking hands. There it was, a blurred photo of the venue. My venue, same date, same font I'd chosen for the invites, but not my name. Mazara Rixley plus Thatchlyn Maury. I stared until the screen burned my retinas. They didn't just lock the door, they locked me out of my own wedding. I hadn't seen Iverlyn Crossan in months. When she showed up at the house, barely knocking, too cheerful, it took everything in me not to ask why she'd suddenly remembered I existed. I just wanted to check in, she said, stepping into the living room like she still belonged there. Her smile was too wide, her tone too polished. Your mom asked me to swing by. Everyone misses your energy, you know? I watched her from the couch, hands folded in my lap, forcing calm into every muscle. My energies being reserved for healing, apparently. She didn't flinch, just chuckled politely. Of course. We've got everything under control, so no need to stress. The timeline's tight, but we're on track. Not you. She placed a pale blue folder on the coffee table. Thought this might reassure you. Details for your peace of mind. Her voice held that rehearsed warmth I'd heard her use in pitch meetings, not with me. I nodded once. Thanks. She gave me that same bright smile again, the one that usually followed a signed contract, and left. I didn't open the folder until the house quieted, until I was sure Rutha was asleep and the hallway was clear. I slipped it into my room, shut the door gently behind me, and sat on the floor beneath the window. The pages inside were crisp. Too crisp. I flipped to the first sheet. The guest list was updated, but not with my name at the top. Mazara Rixley, bride. It stared at me like a headline I'd never approved. My stomach turned. The vendor sheets followed, new contracts, venues confirmed. Floral arrangements shifted slightly, but still in my color palette. I kept turning pages, and there it was. Digital signatures. A forgery, but close. Too close. I pulled out my phone, still jailbroken from an old bypass I'd installed, and opened the archived version of our shared planning app. Every field, every document, every note I had written, erased, replaced. It wasn't sabotage, it was replacement. My wedding, now streamlined, whitewashed, and PDF'd into something I'd never touched. I wasn't even the guest of honor. I wasn't on the list at all. As I stared down at the final vendor receipt, my fingers trembled. The florals I'd carefully selected for their symbolic meanings, gone. The catering preferences I'd written out with Thatchlyn, discarded. My voice cracked in my throat, not loud enough to become a sound. That night, I sat in the corner of my room, knees to my chest, with the folder beside me. My old friend had turned my life into a deliverable. Her hands used to hold swatches and dreams. Now they delivered the paperwork for my erasure. I closed my eyes and remembered the day I first hired her. We'd been two over-caffeinated undergrads with big ideas and not enough sleep, sketching weddings on napkins and joking about what our dream venues would be. Iverlyn always said, "You'll be the bride first. I'll make sure your day's unforgettable." We tasted cakes together, argued about linen textures, sent each other voice memos in the middle of the night brainstorming themes. I'd never trust anyone else with this, I told her. She smiled at the time and said, "This is your vision. I'm just making it real." I gave her my blueprint. She built someone else's house. The betrayal wasn't loud. It wasn't even confrontational. It was in the silence, the way she smiled through it all like I was just a client who got replaced on a project timeline. The next morning, I replayed a message I hadn't been able to shake. It was from my cousin Emily. "Hey, hope you're doing okay. Your mom said you've been handling everything so gracefully." Graceful. What a sanitized word for being removed without consent. I opened my email, typed in the contact info for the venue coordinator. The reply was immediate. For all further updates, please contact Mazzara Rixley. Thank you. My fingers went cold. I printed the entire folder, 3-hole punched every contract, clipped them into a binder. Then I backed them up on a flash drive and hid it under the loose floorboard beneath my bed. They'd already distributed the new version of the story. I was the forgotten plot twist. The quietly recast lead. I was losing my name in real time. That evening, I passed by the hallway just in time to hear Mazzara's voice float up from the den. Iverlyn said we're already trending. She's tagging the campaign photos on Pinterest tomorrow. This could totally blow up. I stopped mid-step, heart tightening. She's always been good at making things look bigger than they are. Mazzara laughed. Mom replied, we'll just make sure we stay ahead of the narrative. The sound of ice clinking in a glass followed. I backed away before they noticed I was there. Every step back to my room felt heavier. I sat on the floor again. This time with scissors, glue, printed screenshots, and a notepad. I compiled every photo, every message, every piece of evidence. I lined them up in the binder, one after another. They thought they could edit me out, but I was done being silent. I wasn't loud yet, but I was permanent. I placed the binder inside a lockbox, my old photos, my original plans, the messages they didn't know I'd saved. They think I'm erased, but I just found my pen again. I woke to voices drifting up from the kitchen, soft, deliberate, and far too rehearsed. The kind of tone my mother used when company was over or when she wanted to appear composed. I slipped from bed, feet quiet on the hardwood floor, and padded toward the hallway. I stayed hidden behind the doorframe, peeking just enough to see the cause of all that sweet, syrupy joy. Mazzara was gliding down the hall, her bare feet silent against the rug. She was wearing the white after-party dress, my after-party dress, the one I'd hand-picked from a boutique in Charleston after a 4-hour consultation. Her arms floated upward as she spun in front of the foyer mirror, her smile radiant, satisfied, smug. From behind her, Rutha's voice floated up like perfume gone sour. You look radiant, just like a real bride should. I didn't move. My fingers gripped the stair railing so hard I thought I'd snap the banister clean in two. I couldn't yell. I couldn't scream. But in my head, something roared. Not grief, not jealousy, rage. It wasn't even rehearsal day. This wasn't preparation. It was production. A full dress run of the lie they'd packaged so carefully. No tears came. My eyes stayed dry, locked on the curve of that dress as it clung to her body like it belonged there. But it didn't. It never would. Back in my room, I picked up the notepad I'd been using to jot fragmented thoughts, lines, questions, doubts. Now it became my journal of truth. I sat at the edge of the bed, listening as Rutha's laughter echoed faintly upstairs. I moved closer to the door. From the hallway vent, sound traveled easily. Poor girl, my mother was saying to someone on speakerphone, probably Aunt Renee or one of her book club sympathizers. She's still not emotionally ready. We've been handling everything. Mazzara stepped in so gracefully. A pause. Then the other voice, thin, nasal, unsure, replied, But she was the one planning the wedding, right? Rutha didn't skip a beat. The wedding must go on, even if one of them can't. That line sat with me like a brick on my chest. I slipped back into my room, not wanting to hear more, but needing to remember. Their words were no longer whispers. They were intentions. I thought of college, my second year, when Rutha insisted I attend therapy after I cried over losing a scholarship. The counselor she chose called me fragile. I had never felt so misrepresented in my life. That memory hit hard now. They weren't just replacing me, they were recasting me, framing me as too unstable, too sensitive, too overwhelmed to handle a life I'd built from scratch. I opened the drawer, found my old tablet buried beneath a stack of magazines, and brought it to life. I opened a cached page on the browser, holding my breath. Mazzara's Instagram story auto-played, the sound already on. She looked directly at the camera, eyes glassy with perfectly placed tears. I never thought I'd be the one, she said, voice cracking in all the right places. But my sister told me she couldn't handle the stress. She begged me to take over. I stared at her face, at the sincerity she wore like a borrowed necklace, and I felt something inside me harden. The comments rolled in below her video like a flood. So brave of you. What a supportive family. She's saving the day. I took screenshots, every single one. Not because I didn't believe what I saw, but because no one would believe me if I didn't. If I didn't speak soon, their version would live longer than the truth. I put the tablet aside and looked around my room. This tomb of silence they'd built for me. A trophy case of memories I didn't agree to relive. But they'd underestimated one thing. I had time. And silence, when used right, becomes a scalpel. I remembered middle school, an absurd play about a magical caterpillar that could sing. I'd gotten the lead, but the night of the performance, I froze. Stage fright took my voice, and Rutha didn't even hesitate. She nudged Mazzara onto the stage and whispered to the teachers, "It's fate." Mazzara sang my solo. The crowd clapped. Mom called it divine timing. I called it erasure. That pattern played on loop now, dressed in white and satin and filtered Instagram tears. I began scribbling phrases into my notepad. She's not up for it. Choosing peace. She said she couldn't do it. Their words, their script. I was just making sure I had the unedited version. If they wanted me to be sick, I'd look sick. If they needed me docile, I'd play along. But only until I could walk out without the walls caving in. At dinner, I waited. Quiet, patient. Let them talk around me like I was an accessory at the table. Then, calmly, I placed my fork down and said, "Where is my wedding dress?" The room stilled. Even the clicking of cutlery paused. Mazzara blinked first. It didn't fit the theme anymore. I turned my head slowly, locking eyes with Rutha. "Then this isn't my wedding anymore." Her mouth twitched, that polished smile she wore like armor. "It's still your name on the invitations, darling." I smiled back. "Then let's make sure I'm there to collect the gifts." She blinked. Not a flinch. Not a word. Later that night, I set up my phone on the windowsill. No lights, no makeup, no script. I hit record. If you're seeing this, you've probably already seen the other version, the polished one, the one where I'm the fragile sister who asked to be replaced. Let me tell you the real story. I spoke into the darkness, not loudly, but clearly, deliberately. My name is Delanora, and I'm still the bride. I never gave up. I was never consulted. I was erased. I stopped recording and stared at the screen. No edits, no background music, just my voice. The truth wasn't pretty, but at least it was mine. Something felt different that morning. My head didn't ache like before. My thoughts didn't float apart like smoke. I could string them together again, build thoughts into questions, questions into decisions. I looked at the glass of water on my nightstand, beside the white pills I hadn't asked for. I'd taken them the first few nights, assuming they were part of my post-concussion routine. But yesterday, the label caught my eye. Clonazepam, an anti-anxiety medication, prescribed apparently to me. No mention of it at the hospital. I'd asked Rutha, casually, "Did the doctor change my prescription?" She barely looked up from her magazine. "You've been so tense lately. It's just to help you sleep. Nothing heavy." My mother's version of calm always came in the form of control. I hadn't taken them since. Instead, I slid each pill under the mattress, one by one. Little white reminders that I was not imagining the haze they were dosing into me. "They didn't sedate me to protect me," I whispered to myself later, watching the shadows on the ceiling. "They did it so I wouldn't interrupt the story." Later that day, while Rutha and Mazzara were out picking cake alternatives, I took advantage of the quiet. I booted up my old laptop. Its screen flickered, but still worked. The house Wi-Fi was locked, but I caught a faint signal from the neighbors. Just enough. The first thing I checked was our group chat, the one with my planner, bridesmaids, cousins, even my college roommate Sarah. Gone. I'd been removed, not archived, not left by choice. Deleted. I DM'd a few people. Only one answered. Brittany from grad school. She replied after 15 minutes. I wish I could talk, but they made me choose. I hope you're okay. Then, silence. I went to social media and found a new album titled Bride Tribe Weekend. All the girls. Same date as our canceled trip to the lake house. Except, I wasn't there. Correction, I had been there, but the pictures posted were carefully cropped. In every shot, if I was present at all, it was the back of my head or my arm, like a ghost walking through her own memories. This wasn't betrayal, it was erasure, with perfect lighting and hashtags. I slammed the laptop closed and buried my face in my hands. This wasn't just happening now, this had always been happening. 2 years ago, I stood up for a student at school who was being unfairly treated by a parent board member. My principal called me into his office. No scolding, just reassignment to less controversial duties. At dinner, Rutha had said, "Next time, pick your battles. You don't need to fight for everyone, especially not people who won't fight for you." They mistook my silence for peace, but peace without truth was just polished compliance. That same pattern echoed now. My supposed grace under pressure was being weaponized, repackaged to justify my absence, my replacement, my erasure. I opened my email, drafted a short message to Thatchlin, not to his number, but to his professional email. Subject, still me. No drama, no desperation, just 3 paragraphs explaining what had changed and what hadn't. I told him about the pills, the passwords, the silence. Then I waited. I refreshed the inbox every 10 minutes. The blue dot blinked once. Read. But nothing followed. He saw me, and still chose silence. That was worse than anything Rutha or Mazzara could have done, because he had the full picture, and still backed away. The next morning, I didn't ask permission. I walked straight down the stairs into the kitchen, where Rutha and Mazzara were in the middle of a planning call, fabric swatches spread across the island. The conversation stopped like someone hit mute. I opened the fridge, took out a bottle of water, turned slowly to face them. Mazzara offered a glass filled with something green. Smoothie? Helps with nerves. I've been drinking them too. I looked at it, then at her, then set the water down. I'm good, I said. Can't ask permission to be human. I left without another word, the tension following me like a second shadow. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat up in bed, scrolling through every file, message, screenshot, and calendar appointment I had backed up on a flash drive. Then I pulled a small recorder from my drawer, pressed record, and started talking. My name is Delanora Creed. If you're hearing this, it means they've already told you a different version. I paused. They've rewritten the script, but I've kept the receipts. I read every change, every redaction, every message. I didn't cry, not once, because I wasn't documenting my pain. I was preserving my proof. When I finished, I saved the file, copied it onto 2 separate flash drives, and placed one in a hollowed book on my shelf. The other, I tucked beneath the lining of my suitcase. If I disappeared, this wouldn't. I left before sunrise, using the quiet latch on the back door that Dad always forgot to fix. No one stirred as I slipped past the porch, the dew still clinging to the grass like it hadn't decided to let go of the night. It was my first time outside alone in days, and the air tasted like defiance. I kept my head down, hoodie pulled forward, backpack snug. Every step was calculated, every sidewalk crack accounted for. I didn't care about the risk. I needed answers, needed proof. Iverland's old office sat on the corner of East Liberty and Price, next to a shuttered florist and a dog grooming boutique that had a reopening soon sign collecting mold. But her office? Locked. A crisp, laminated sign taped to the door. Moved. New HQ. By appointment only. Of course. The glass was freshly Windexed, but I could still make out the space behind it, what used to be ours. I saw the old corkboard, once plastered with my wedding colors, now showcasing swatches titled Mazzara's Southern Dream. A slideshow of her face played silently on a monitor in the corner. My imagination had been recycled and sold. Just before I turned away, the interior door creaked. Lisa, her assistant, and someone I once mentored, opened it. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Delanora?" she asked, halfway between guilt and panic. I'm not here to make trouble, I said softly. Just need to see what's been changed. She hesitated, looked back into the hallway, then motioned me in. I followed her past the welcome desk, now decked out in blush tones and fake eucalyptus, to a conference room that reeked of lavender oil and white lies. Lisa pulled up the master planning sheet. Her fingers trembled slightly over the trackpad. Everything's been consolidated. We transferred the files when your mom brought in new approvals. Approvals? I asked. You mean forged signatures? She flinched. The screen filled with tabs, vendor lists, seating charts, catering quotes. Every file I had once named, revised, shared, now tagged, updated. Bride, Mazzara Rixley. Groom, Thatchlin Maury. My eyes locked on the digital signature. My own name, in my exact handwriting. I didn't sign this, I said flatly. Lisa swallowed. Your mom said you gave permission. She said you were stepping back. I nodded once, bitter. So you took that at face value? Iverlyn said it was above my pay grade to ask. Of course she did. I opened my phone, took photos of every file, screen after screen, page after page. I need copies, I said. Lisa stood there, frozen. Lisa, if you don't help me now, you're part of this. She finally nodded and hit print. As I waited for the documents, I stared at the wall of floral mock-ups, all too familiar. Burgundy peonies, ivory roses, gold accents, vintage jazz trio listed in the entertainment file. My vision, my vendors, my name erased. I left through the side door, careful not to draw attention, and walked to the park down the street, found a bench under a tree I used to read under during college, and let myself sit for the first time that morning. The anger didn't come all at once. It unspooled in waves. I thought back to that client pitch 3 years ago, how I had crafted every detail for that presentation, only for Mazzara to borrow my flash drive when I was out sick. She presented it as her own, landed a contract, got featured in a lifestyle magazine. I got a warning for missing the meeting, and I let it go. They've been rewriting my name on paper since before I noticed, I whispered. And I let them, over and over, because it was easier than being called difficult or jealous or dramatic. I opened the venue's public calendar on my phone, found the listing for the upcoming Saturday. Rixley Creed Celebration. It was all there. My ceremony. My timeline, just not my name. Scrolling through Instagram, I saw posts from vendors, excited to bring the bride's vision to life, photos of centerpieces I had designed, the velvet chairs I'd chosen, the string lights I'd drawn into the layout mock-up, and they all tagged Mazzara. I clenched my jaw. They may have stolen the stage, but I still had the script. I uploaded every file to a private Google folder, titled it, For the Real Bride, then backed it all up to a flash drive, wrote an email to myself with a timestamp, wrote a second to a law school friend who now worked for a firm in Atlanta. I didn't explain everything, just left a coded line. If I vanish, you know where to find the truth. I folded the documents and zipped them into my backpack. When I walked back into the house, no one noticed. They were all out front reviewing arrival instructions with the valet team. I crept upstairs, lifted the floorboard beneath my dresser, and slid the flash drive into place. As I walked past the hallway, I paused. From the kitchen, Rutha's voice filtered out. Just be gracious when people ask about her, she said to Mazzara. We don't want a scene. I pressed my palm to the wall. A scene is exactly what they're going to get. The morning before the wedding, I woke up with a pit in my stomach so heavy it felt like stone. I'd slept in my clothes, phone still clutched in my hand from the night before. Something told me not to move yet, not until I checked. I opened my email first, nothing new. Then, as if muscle memory kicked in, I tapped the Instagram app. And there it was. Mazzara had posted a full-length video, soft piano music, childhood photos, images of us as girls, eating popsicles on the porch, dressing up in our mother's shoes, running barefoot through the backyard. Then, the transition. A slow fade to Mazzara in a bridal gown, my bridal gown, and the caption across the screen, my sister asked me to take her place. She gave me this gift. I felt the breath catch in my chest. It wasn't the images, It was the comments. "You're the sister every girl dreams of." What a powerful example of love and sacrifice. This family is pure grace. I set the phone down. My hand trembled. Not from fear, but from the rage I'd been bottling for days. This wasn't a lie anymore. It was a performance, and people love a good twist. I tapped the video again, this time turning the volume up. Halfway through, I heard it, my voice, except I had never said those words. "I'm not strong enough to do this. I want my sister to shine." It was unmistakably me, my cadence, my tone, even the nervous pause I always made before finishing a hard sentence. But I never recorded that, never said those things. I played it again, and again. The audio was polished, sentimental, laced with just enough vulnerability to make it believable. I sat perfectly still, letting the weight of what they'd done settle over me like a wet sheet. It wasn't just identity theft, it was soul swapping. I opened my drive, retrieved old voicemails, birthday messages I'd recorded, and uploaded them into a public AI analyzer. I knew the tech, knew how it worked. I used to teach digital ethics in high school media class. The site ran its scan, 84% match, synthetic audio generated using voice modeling software. I printed the results, added them to the binder I'd titled Fabricated Bride, a folder that was beginning to look more like a lawsuit than a scrapbook. Then I turned on the camera on my tablet. No lights, no editing. I stared into the lens and said, "This is what my real voice sounds like, and I'm still using it." I didn't post it. Not yet. I needed to wait, needed the timing to cut deep. Later that afternoon, a text lit up my phone from Haley, a college friend turned casual bridesmaid who had gone radio silent for a week. "I saw the video. I didn't know you were so overwhelmed. I wish you'd told us." I didn't hesitate. "That's not me. That's what they wanted you to believe." No response. I locked the phone and paced the room. It hit me like a punch. This wasn't the first time I had been erased. Freshman year, I gave Mazzara my annotated outline for a midterm essay. She said she just needed a framework. She submitted a nearly identical paper. She got the department award. I got called in for a late assignment. Every time I shared, I gave up credit. Now they'd taken even my breakdown and dressed it up for social media. I leaned against the door frame, pressing my head into the wood. They had stolen my voice. And I had let them over and over. That night, I set up the phone again. This time, I recorded a full message. No script, just truth. I didn't give up. I was cut out. That video? That's not love. That's manipulation. I showed screenshots, the AI match results, the altered guest list, my signature on contracts I never touched. Then I included the date of the engagement, the timestamp on my original wedding design files, medical records clearing me post-injury. I ended with, "The truth may not trend, but it will remain." I scheduled it for 10 a.m. the next morning, same time as the ceremony. I closed the app, tucked my phone into a drawer, and lay back, hands behind my head. For the first time in days, I felt grounded. But it didn't last. Around midnight, my screen lit up. A notification from an Instagram account I didn't recognize, @brides.fade. The video I'd just recorded was live, already shared, already circulating. The caption, "She didn't vanish, she was silenced." And I hadn't posted it. I stared at the screen. If I didn't post it, who did? The morning of the wedding, I was already awake before the sun cracked the sky. The air felt heavy, like the world was holding its breath for what I might do next. I sat on the edge of the bed, lacing up my sneakers, when a text buzzed onto the screen of the phone I'd secretly restored from an old drawer. "Don't go silent. I know what they did." No sender name, just the number, but I recognized the phrasing. It was someone who knew, someone who had seen the inside of the mess. Before I could respond, another notification landed in my inbox. An email this time, the subject line crystal clear. Guardianship request for Delanora Creed, drafted by Rutha Belvere. I clicked it open, my pulse drumming in my ears. The PDF attached was a legal draft, real letterhead, filed under mental instability, suggested oversight of assets, Medical power of attorney. They weren't just planning to remove me from a wedding, they were planning to remove me from myself. I didn't pack a bag. I just grabbed the flash drive, printed out every piece of evidence I had, and left the house like I was going for a morning run. 30 minutes later, I stood inside the Chatham County Courthouse, sweaty, wild-eyed, holding the documents like they might disintegrate. I need to file an emergency affidavit, I told the clerk. Now. Today. She looked up, eyebrows raised. You're Delanora Creed? Yes. Her eyes flicked down to her computer. You came just in time. This was set to be submitted at 9 a.m. by your mother. I'm submitting my own version, I said, sliding everything across the counter. Medical clearances, email timestamps, wedding contracts with forged signatures, audio transcripts, AI voice analysis. The clerk took a moment, then nodded. We'll put a freeze on the request until this is reviewed by the judge. I exhaled, just once, before it all came crashing in again. They didn't want a daughter. They wanted a docile placeholder. I sat down in the hallway outside the clerk's window, hands resting on my knees, when I saw him. Thatchlin. He looked wrecked. Same suit from a week ago, unshaven, circles under his eyes. He sat down 2 seats away, not looking at me at first. They told me you walked away, he said. Said you were done. That you'd asked Mazzara to step in. I didn't answer. He turned to me then, eyes red. I wanted to believe you wouldn't just leave. But I saw the video, heard your voice. That wasn't my voice, I said flatly. He blinked. What? It was generated, deep-faked, AI matched. I have the report. He ran a hand through his hair. You believed a clip over me? I didn't know who to believe. Your mom. She made it sound final. That's what they do. They don't argue. They rewrite. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a folder, and handed it to me. Original wedding agreement, he said. I never signed the update with Mazzara's name. I refused. I opened it. His initials were there. My name was the only one listed. I recorded the conversation with your mom, he added. She didn't know I had a backup device running. I looked at him, my voice flat. Why are you telling me this now? Because I realized too late that silence helps the liar, not the truth. Together, we walked the folder back inside. The clerk took the audio file, plugged in headphones, and nodded slowly as she listened. Between this and what you filed, she said, there's grounds to halt everything. Guardianship, wedding funds, contract transfers. I don't want revenge, I said. I want it all public. She looked surprised. I want the truth louder than the lie, I added. We filed for an injunction to freeze all wedding-related financial accounts under my name. We submitted the audio, the video analysis, the contracts, the forged planning documents. Then we left. At noon sharp, the video I'd scheduled the night before went live. Title: The Bride You Forgot Still Exists. It opened with my real voice. Calm. Clear. This isn't a love story, I said. This is a lesson in erasure. Screenshots of documents flashed on screen. Emails, legal drafts, AI tests, court filings. It ended with, a wedding built on theft is not a union, it's a production, and I'm no longer in the audience. The hashtag, still Delanora, trended within the hour. Friends who hadn't spoken in weeks messaged. Some apologized. Others said nothing. One person reposted the video and added, "Truth doesn't need permission." That evening, just as I was getting ready to close the laptop, another email came through. From the venue manager. Subject: Tomorrow's event. Body: Your family insists the wedding proceeds as planned. Will you be attending? I stared at the screen for a long moment. They didn't need me for the wedding, but I'd be there anyway. I stepped through the side door of the church, where the scent of aged wood mixed faintly with floral makeup powder. No welcoming committee, no warm glances, just murmurs from staff shifting chairs and arranging decor. Was she supposed to be here? I thought she declined. I didn't correct them. My heels tapped lightly on the old stone floor, the sound swallowed by ambient music coming from the main hall. I wore the after-party gown, the one I was supposed to change into after the ceremony. Today, it became armor. Fitted, deep red with a black belt at the waist. Not bridal white. This was deliberate. No grand entrance, no red carpet moment. I chose the shadowed corridor that led backstage, where light was soft enough to hide reactions and intentions alike. I could hear laughter ahead. And then I saw her, Mazzara. She sat in a tall makeup chair, champagne flute raised, surrounded by stylists fluttering around her like butterflies. Her gown shimmered, a near copy of mine. A slightly lighter in shade, slightly louder in taste, like she tried to mimic me but turned my essence into a department store imitation with a boutique label. One stylist caught a glimpse of me in the mirror. "Wait, who is that?" she asked, eyes narrowing. I didn't stay long enough for the answer. I snapped a photo. No one saw me. But I'd seen enough. I made my way into the reception space, quiet and deliberate. Guests were arriving, chatting, laughing, basking in artificial joy. I stayed close to the edges, watching. An older man, one of my mother's distant cousins, approached cautiously. He squinted, confused. "Are you the bride?" I gave a half smile. Not according to the program. Then I turned to the seating chart. My eyes scanned the names, the positions. When I found mine, it was misspelled. Delanora Creed. 2 R's. An error so simple, it couldn't have been accidental. My assigned table? Back row, near the restrooms. Labeled as Overflow Family. Like I was an afterthought. I remembered my 16th birthday, same feeling. I'd sat in a dress I picked myself, grinning through forced smiles while my mother apologized for forgetting the cake. Dad had been tied up at work. That same invisible weight pressed on me now. Present, but discarded. Outside in the garden, Mazzara posed among hydrangeas while the photographer snapped away. The sun caught a glimmer in her hair, a veil and pearl hair clip I recognized instantly. No, not that. It was Grandma Zerelda's heirloom, meant for me. She'd left it to me in a handwritten note tucked inside an old velvet box. "For your wedding, not theirs." Rage flushed through me. My jaw clenched so tight it ached. That was mine, the one piece of this whole day that was supposed to belong solely to me. I raised my phone, zoomed in, and captured the betrayal. Then I sent the photo to Grandma. My hands trembled, but not with fear, pure fury. Seconds later, her reply came in. "Take it back. No punctuation, no pleasantries, just a command." And I understood what she meant. The ceremony began. Everyone rose when the organ music started. Rows of guests stood as one, heads turning toward the aisle, eyes glowing with expectation. But I stayed seated, still, grounded. Heads slowly turned toward me, a few with pity, most with discomfort. I saw someone nudge another and whisper something. Averting eyes became a sport. Rutha stepped forward to speak before the vows. Her voice carried, practiced, and polished. "We thank Mazzara for stepping into this love with such grace." My pulse quickened. In my palm, I held a small silver flash drive like it was a sacred relic. It wasn't just data. It was my story. Uncut, unfiltered. In my mind, I whispered, "You made me invisible. I chose to be undeniable." A wedding assistant approached, leaning toward me with quiet urgency. "I'm sorry," she said. "You weren't included in the final seating. Would you mind?" I cut her off, offering a sealed envelope, on the front, addressed to the venue owner in my attorney's neat handwriting. "You'll want to read this before the ceremony continues." She hesitated. I didn't flinch. My gaze never broke. Then she turned and disappeared behind the velvet curtain lining the altar stage. A ripple of whispers spread across the crowd like static. People leaned in, looking for answers. I offered none. I didn't need to anymore. No one saw who activated the screen. No tech crew member claimed the moment. It just happened. From the side of the altar, a large monitor suddenly came to life. My pre-recorded video filled the screen. I stood in that same crimson dress, hair slicked back, eyes clear as day. "My name is Delanora Creed," my voice rang out. "And you erased me." Gasps swept the room like wind through dry leaves. Some stood in shock, others froze. I stood slowly from my seat, letting everyone see me now. Not just a name on a miswritten card, not a placeholder at the overflow table. In the video, I spoke again, one final line, steady, undeniable. But I never left. Silence is never truly silent, not when it follows truth like that. After my video finished playing, it wasn't quiet. It was stunned, a hollow kind of stillness where people forget how to breathe out loud. No one clapped, no one dared to move. Not until, from the far back of the room, a single slow clap broke through like thunder. Mazara's body jolted slightly, as if the sound physically struck her. She took one instinctive step away from the altar, hands trembling just enough to rattle the pearls on her wrist. Her veil shifted. Rutha leaned toward the officiant, whispering fast and sharp like a snake hissing behind a silk curtain. The screen faded to black, and yet it felt louder than anything playing seconds ago. No one expected me to fight back, and no one expected receipts. I stepped forward from the side aisle, not in a rush, not in panic. I didn't sneak in this time. I walked straight down the aisle meant for fairy tales and promises, not carrying flowers, but something heavier, truth. My heels hit the floor with rhythm, measured, unwavering. I could see people turning their heads, murmuring as if waking from a dream they didn't know they were in. The venue manager appeared suddenly, a tablet clutched in one hand, confusion painted across his face. Before he could even ask, Kafira Dawes appeared behind him like justice wrapped in navy wool. She didn't smile, she didn't need to. "I'm here on behalf of Ms. Delanora Creed," she said, voice crisp enough to cut glass. "Please halt this event immediately. You've just participated in a ceremony rooted in fraud and emotional coercion." She handed over a folder thick with legal filings. He flipped it open, eyes widening with every page. "These are official injunctions," she continued, outlining evidence of forged documents, unauthorized AI audio used to mimic consent, and deliberate psychological manipulation. Rutha tried to speak, but Kafira raised one hand without even looking at her. "This is no longer just a family disagreement. This is identity theft. This is reputational destruction. This is abuse, wrapped in a white ribbon and sold as tradition." The pianist, who had resumed playing soft notes earlier, stopped mid-key, hands frozen above the ivory. Mazara's veil slipped halfway off her head, exposing the stolen hairpiece like a thief caught mid-act. She made no move to fix it. I hadn't seen Kafira in nearly 5 years, but I remembered exactly the last time our paths had crossed. College graduation. She was a mess of red-eyed exhaustion and caffeine shakes, drowning in student loan paperwork. I had talked her off that ledge more than once. One night, after she'd failed a mock trial and nearly dropped out, I stayed up coaching her until dawn. I remembered the way she looked at me and said, "If anyone ever tries to silence you again, I'll be the one yelling for you." And she kept that promise. She saw my video, saw the early leaks of the manipulated signatures and the footage of Rutha cornering me behind closed doors. She didn't wait for an invitation. She dropped everything, printed every document I'd compiled, and drove through the night from Charleston. Now here she stood, not just my attorney. She was a witness, a force, a reminder that sometimes justice doesn't come from institutions. It comes from the people you once carried and who now carry you. The audience shifted from confusion to concern. Questions erupted like popcorn. Wait, is that true? Did Delanora agree to this wedding? Did she sign that form? Is that really her voice? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Rutha lunged for the microphone, trying to reclaim the room, but Kafira stepped into her path without missing a beat. "This platform is closed to you now," she said simply, her tone like an iron gate locking shut. "You've done enough damage." Guests began to filter out, some quickly, some slowly, but all with the weight of complicity in their eyes. A few came by my side briefly, whispering apologies, holding my hand for a second too long. Others simply looked away, unable to face what they helped pretend wasn't real. Flashbulbs started going off as reporters, tipped off by the viral video, arrived and began asking questions. I ignored them. They didn't deserve my answers, not yet. They once used cameras to erase my story. Today, those same lenses documented its return. I stepped to the front of the altar, where fairy lights still blinked behind me, oblivious to the storm that had just ripped through their picture-perfect scene. I didn't shout. I didn't tremble. I know many of you came here expecting a wedding, I began, voice steady, clear. You were handed a program with someone else's script. They wrote me out of my own life and cast someone else in the role that was never theirs to play. I looked directly at Mazara, who was no longer weeping, no longer gloating, just frozen. But this isn't their story. It never was. This life is mine. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I didn't demand they understand. I simply reached into my purse, pulled out the flash drive, and placed it on the altar next to the bouquet. Then I added a sealed envelope marked, "For the record." And I walked out. The evening air wrapped around me like an exhale I'd been holding in for years. I was halfway down the stairs of the church when my phone buzzed. Voicemail. Thatchlin. His voice cracked just enough to feel real. "You were braver than all of us. I'm sorry. I should have stood with you sooner." A second buzz. Text message. Unknown number, but I recognized the name. Heir to House Heritage, one of the largest legacy family blogs in the region. We'd like to offer you an exclusive. We believe your voice matters. I stared at the screen, thumbs still. They silenced me once, and it made me mysterious. But when I spoke, I made myself unforgettable. I didn't wake up to applause. There were no congratulatory texts from old friends or cheerful follow-up calls from well-meaning strangers. Just silence. Thick, steady, and unapologetic. The kind that settles after everything's been said, like dust on hardwood floors after furniture's been dragged out. Sunlight stretched across my apartment, but it didn't warm the space. My body ached, not from physical strain, but from holding my own ground for too long. The echoes of my words from the altar still lingered in my mind, like a bell that keeps ringing long after it's been struck. I reached for my phone. Notifications flooded the screen. Messages from people I didn't know. Some cheering, some confessing. A few were angry. 3 missed calls from my mother, all unanswered. And 1 simple text from Thatchlin. "You okay?" I stared at it for a long time. My thumb hovered over the reply button. I didn't answer. By the front door, her leash still hung where it always did. My dog, Cricket, used to meet me every morning with that expectant tilt of her head and the impatient tapping of her nails on the wood floor. Not anymore. They didn't just try to erase my name. They took pieces of peace, little things, like the joy of a morning routine or the comfort of fur against my ankle while I made coffee. Cricket had died 3 months ago, during a period when I was so emotionally buried in family chaos, I hadn't even noticed her getting sick until it was too late. That guilt still pressed against my chest like a bruise that refused to fade. By late afternoon, I needed to leave. Not for errands or meetings, but because staying inside my thoughts too long felt dangerous. I drove the familiar route to Grandma Zerelda's cottage, the same dusty road, the same cypress trees bending gently as if bowing to the woman who'd lived there longer than most of them had roots. She was already on the porch, rocking chair creaking like it had been waiting for me too. A pitcher of sweet tea glistened with condensation. 2 glasses. We didn't hug. We didn't say much at first. We just sat there, 2 women with matching cheekbones and equally sharp memories, watching the sky shift from gold to peach to quiet. Eventually, Grandma said, "You looked like me when you walked out of there yesterday." Her voice didn't waver. Neither did mine when I responded. "I felt like you." We didn't talk about the wedding. We talked about dignity, about names and what they cost, about how silence doesn't protect you if you have to shrink to stay quiet. She poured me more tea and after a pause, reached beneath the wicker cushion beside her. "I was holding on to this," she said, handing me a sealed envelope. "Didn't know if you'd need it. Then I saw your video." The envelope was thick. The handwriting was hers, bold, slanted left like it had somewhere to be. I waited until the porch lights flickered on before I opened it. It was dated a year ago. If they ever make you small again, it began, remember, your worth isn't up for debate. The rest of the letter felt like a balm made of ink and intention, stories about her youth, about walking away from a family name that once tried to define her worth by who she married, about how it took her decades to understand that sometimes blood only means DNA, not loyalty. Tucked behind the letter was a notarized legal document, ownership transfer of her land, directly to me. No mention of my parents, no shared interest, just my name, alone. I stared at it, heart heavy and oddly light at once. She didn't just love me, I thought. She prepared for my war. This wasn't about inheritance. It was about insulation, a hedge against manipulation, a quiet fortress disguised as paperwork. I folded the letter slowly, pressing it to my chest before tucking it into my bag. I didn't need to say thank you. She already knew. Later that night, my phone rang again. I didn't answer, but the voicemail came through. Rutha's voice, brittle as old glass. Let's talk. The media's twisting things. You know how this looks. I let it play twice. Then a text popped up from Mazzara. I didn't know they'd go that far. I'm sorry. Please don't ruin my career over this. It hit me in the exact place I'd finally managed to stitch back together. Not once had either of them asked if I was okay. Not once did they show concern for the person behind the damage. They were only afraid of what it meant for them. I opened a blank message. Typed, "You built a fire to burn me, and now you're cold." Then I deleted it, letting silence do the heavy lifting this time. By midnight, I logged into the family group chat. I read every message since the wedding, some neutral, some passive, a few performatively shocked. No one called out what happened. No one stood up, so I did the one thing they'd notice. I left the chat. Then I posted a single story to my public profile. No filters, just my face, tired but unashamed. Healing in peace. Don't reach out unless it's about real love, not redemption marketing. It felt like unclenching a jaw I hadn't realized was locked. Within an hour, my inbox filled, not with family backlash, but with stories. Women from Michigan, Georgia, Montana, some younger, some older, all with versions of the same narrative, replaced, reshaped, rewritten. Turns out I wasn't the only one cut out of the family photo. Turns out truth has a lot of sisters. By sunrise, I was standing in front of a small studio space I'd quietly signed the lease for last week. It had old windows, warped wood floors, and light that poured in like hope. I used part of Grandma's land inheritance to cover the deposit. The key turned with a click that sounded like permission. Inside was dust and echoes and potential. I pulled out my laptop from its case, plugged it in, and opened a folder titled Bride Not Bullied. As the screen lit up, I realized something. I wasn't just erasing their version, I was designing mine. The sign on the front door of my studio said what I needed it to say. By appointment only, truth always welcome. I stood just inside, one hand on the window ledge, the other adjusting the placement of a glass vase holding wildflowers from Grandma's garden. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. The walls still smelled faintly of fresh paint and ambition. I was organizing swatches on the consultation table when my phone buzzed. I ignored the first alert, then a second, then a third. By the fifth one, curiosity outweighed my resistance. The exposé had gone live, a full feature on a major women's empowerment platform, right there on my screen. Bride Erased, How One Woman Took Her Name and Her Power Back. My chest didn't swell with pride. It tightened with relief, because for once, my name was being used for truth, not theater. They wanted their version to trend. I made mine permanent. The article didn't hold back. Screenshots, timeline receipts. Voice analysis proving the audio used in those manipulated videos wasn't mine. Testimony from Kafira. Even anonymous guest quotes about the tension they'd sensed but didn't speak on. The comments section was lit up. People weren't just reacting. They were rallying. She's not just the bride, she's the blueprint. Her grace under fire, that's legacy. Mazzara was trending too, but not in the way she'd hoped. Within 24 hours, 2 of her brand deals were dropped, One even released a statement about core value misalignment. And just like that, the fake glitter began to peel. Rutha tried her own form of damage control. A vague social post read, "Sometimes mothers make hard choices, even if they hurt." The replies under it cut straight through. Hard choices don't involve AI manipulation and legal trickery. You made her hurt quietly. She made you answer loudly. I didn't reply to any of it. Not publicly, not personally. I didn't need to. Later that evening, I was clearing a stack of old files in the back corner of the studio when I found it, an envelope addressed to me in my handwriting. I'd written it to myself. Weeks ago. I sat down on the floor, cross-legged, the concrete cool beneath me. I opened it slowly, not knowing what version of me I was about to meet. If this doesn't end well, at least I tried. That was the first line. I let it echo in my chest. The letter was raw, almost childlike, like I was trying to remind myself that bravery isn't loud, it's just consistent. It talked about the fear of being alone, of losing the last bits of identity I had left, of dying a quiet death in a room full of family who clapped for someone else wearing my story. I read every word aloud. Then I folded it carefully, placed it in the ceramic dish I kept by the back porch, and burned it. Not as a symbol of anger, but release. I don't need permission to stay in my own life anymore. The following morning, I drove out to the family estate, not for closure, not to confront anyone. I went for a frame, literally. Grandma Zerelda had once told me there was a single gold frame, tucked in the attic, meant for the first picture I chose to display in my first real space. But sometime between her health scare and the wedding chaos, that frame ended up in Mazara's possession. Set up in her home, with a fake candid of her and Rutha posing as if legacy could be staged. I walked through the front door like I owned every step. No one stopped me, not even the housekeeper. I climbed the stairs. The frame sat on the hallway table outside the formal dining room. I picked it up, turned toward the kitchen where my father stood, watching silently. He didn't say a word. I nodded once, and I left. In the car, I whispered to myself, "You raised me to be polite, but you forgot to raise me to stay quiet when it mattered." Months passed. I didn't block Rutha's number, but I never answered. She tried again last week. A voicemail with too much pause between words, as if searching for sincerity in a script she hadn't rehearsed. I deleted it. At dinner one night with a few clients turned friends, someone asked, "Was it worth it?" I smiled at my plate before answering. "Not worth it, required. There's a difference." The room went quiet in agreement. No one argued with that. Later, back at my studio, I found a card taped to the front door. No postage. Hand-delivered. Inside, a message from a teenage girl I'd consulted for. Her handwriting still wobbled with uncertainty, but her words were clear. "You made me feel like I could say no, too." I placed it on my desk. Right next to the gold frame, now holding a photo of me and Grandma sipping tea on the porch, laughing. That picture had no filter, no performance, just truth. On a cool fall morning, I stepped into a bookstore near the historic district. The windows were fogged slightly from the change in weather. The place smelled like old stories and strong coffee. I wandered past cookbooks and parenting guides until I reached the nonfiction aisle. There, in a display stand, sat an anthology on family dynamics and resilience. I knew it had been published. I just hadn't seen it in the wild yet. I flipped through the table of contents. Chapter 7. The Bride Who Didn't Vanish. I didn't cry. I didn't take a picture for proof. I didn't even buy the book. I lived it. They wrote me out of their ending. So I built my own beginning.